They told me there was no room for me, on the cruise I paid for, in the house I built, in the family I raised. But this is not a story of heartbreak. It's a story of return, of reclaiming dignity, inch by inch, not with revenge, but with precision. And it began with a cup of tea.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Margaret Lane. I'm 65 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. They came over with lemon bars and bad news. Vanessa had made them herself. She always baked when she needed to deliver something unpleasant. It gave her an excuse to smile and say, "I brought treats," like we were just neighbors catching up. The smell of artificial lemon and powdered sugar clung to the plastic container as she placed it on the counter, as if sweetness could soften the edges of what was coming. I watched her glide into my kitchen like she owned it. She wore pale beige slacks and a linen blouse that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail. Not a strand out of place. Not a wrinkle in sight. She was a walking magazine spread labelled Success. Malcolm followed a step behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes not quite meeting mine. That alone told me everything I needed to know. "Mum," he started, after we'd sat down at the table. The lemon bars sat untouched between us. "We wanted to talk to you about the cruise." I held my teacup steady between my hands. Earl Grey, no sugar. My fingers curled tightly around the porcelain. "It's just," he continued, glancing at Vanessa like a schoolboy asking his teacher for help. "Things have been kind of tight lately." Vanessa nodded, a look of pained sympathy on her face. "We've been crunching the numbers, Margaret, and the truth is, we need to cut back a little. The cruise is still happening, of course, but it's just going to be the two of us." I didn't blink. I didn't move. The words settled on my chest like cold ash. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping into the kind of tone people use with the elderly and small children. "And we're also a little worried about the conditions. You know how hot and humid the Caribbean can get. The heat, the stairs, the walking. It might be too much." I took a slow sip of tea. It burned my tongue, but I welcomed the sting. "I see," I said, careful to keep my voice even. Malcolm exhaled, relieved that I hadn't made a scene. He looked so young in that moment, almost like the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, sticky-fingered and proud. But that boy was long gone. "You two enjoy yourselves," I said, and smiled. Vanessa beamed like I'd given her a gold star. "Thank you for understanding." They left within 15 minutes, said they had errands, said they'd send photos, said all the right things. I stood at the door and waved as they pulled out of the driveway, her manicured hand resting on the windowsill, his face focused on the road ahead. When the car turned the corner, I closed the door and locked it behind them. I sat back down at the kitchen table. The lemon bars still sat there, sweating under their plastic cover. I looked at them for a long time before finally peeling it open and taking a bite. Too sweet, too soft, like everything Vanessa touched. I wrapped the rest in foil and dropped them in the trash. In the quiet that followed, I let my eyes drift to the framed photo on the windowsill. It was Malcolm, age 6, in a homemade pirate costume, grinning through a missing front tooth. His hand was in mine. I had made that costume from scratch, spent 3 nights sewing the patches and gluing fake gold coins to his belt. That night, when I went to bed, I didn't cry. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead. The room felt colder than usual, emptier. The next morning, I cleaned the house top to bottom, scrubbed baseboards, vacuumed under furniture, dusted the shelves. I needed something to do, something to prove I still mattered, that I still existed. In the hallway closet, I came across the suitcase I'd pulled down weeks ago, the one I planned to use for the cruise. Inside was a stack of folded clothes, a new bottle of sunscreen, and a pair of soft canvas walking shoes I'd splurged on. I sat there on the floor for a long time, holding one of the shoes in my lap. Then I stood up, placed the shoes back in the suitcase, zipped it up, and pushed it to the back of the closet. That evening, I made dinner for one: roasted chicken, green beans, a small glass of wine. I set the table properly, lit a candle, and ate in silence. Pretended it was by choice. After the dishes were washed and dried, I turned off the lights and walked to the guest house. I'd been living there ever since Malcolm and Vanessa moved into the main house. It was supposed to be temporary. "Just until they got on their feet," Malcolm said. That was 3 years ago. The guest house was small, but it was mine. A kitchenette, a modest bathroom, a little sitting area. My husband had built it years ago as a hobby project, never knowing it would one day become my sanctuary. I sat in my armchair and looked around. The walls were lined with books. The shelves still held photos of my late husband, of Malcolm as a boy, of holidays long past. Memories lived here, even if I didn't. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves scraped against the window like fingernails. I thought about the cruise, about the sun on the water, the sound of waves against the hull. I had imagined sitting on the deck with Malcolm, pointing out constellations like we used to. Instead, I'd been told, politely, of course, that there was no room for me. And the worst part wasn't that they disinvited me. It was that they didn't think I'd fight it. Later that night, I reached for the photo albums stacked under the coffee table. Dust clung to the edges, but the pages inside were untouched, preserved like pressed flowers. I flipped through Christmases, graduations, scraped knees, and birthday cakes. There was a time when I was the center of it all, the gravity that held everything together. I found a picture of Malcolm, maybe 8 or 9, sitting on my lap, laughing so hard his eyes were closed. I traced his face with my finger and whispered, "Where did you go, baby?" Somewhere deep inside, something small, shifted, not enough to name yet, but it was there, waiting. The house was still when I woke up the next morning, the kind of quiet that made you feel like the world had forgotten you. Even the birds outside seemed reluctant to sing. I stood in the kitchenette of the guest house, pouring myself a cup of coffee. The mug had a chip on the handle, a jagged little crescent I never bothered to replace. I found some comfort in that imperfection. It was honest, worn, real, unlike so many things in my life now. As the coffee brewed, I drifted toward the window. From this side of the property, I could see the main house, my house, once upon a time. Its white shutters looked freshly painted. The porch swing I used to sit on with Malcolm had been replaced with one of those sterile modern benches. I didn't recognize the curtains anymore. Even the light that spilled from the windows looked colder, less inviting. It was no longer a home. It was a stage set, curated and spotless, but empty of memory. Back in the day, that house was filled with music, with the scent of cinnamon rolls and furniture polish, with laughter and piano keys and the low hum of my husband's radio shows. We had raised Malcolm under that roof. We had planted the maple tree together in the front yard the day we paid off the mortgage. He was just 6 then, jumping in muddy boots and shouting, "We're free!" But the past has a way of fading like old wallpaper. I carried my coffee to the sitting area and lowered myself into the armchair, joints popping in quiet protest. A morning ritual. I reached for the photo frame on the side table. It held a picture of my late husband, Robert. He wore his navy uniform, eyes fierce with youth, his arm around my waist. That photo had outlasted his medals, his suits, even his scent in the closet. I touched his face, then glanced toward the bookshelf. I didn't mean to start cleaning again, but grief doesn't knock. It just lets itself in and starts rearranging the furniture. As I dusted the lower shelf, a loose sheet of paper caught my eye, tucked between the pages of an old ledger. I pulled it free. It was a receipt, crumpled, then smoothed out. My eyes scanned the bold numbers first, $14,800. A cruise line. Departure date, next month. Passenger names, Malcolm Lane, Vanessa Lane. I stared at it. My breath caught mid-throat. My hand gripped the edge of the table for support. The same amount I had given Malcolm just 2 months ago. He had come to me in a mild panic about a roof repair. Said the insurance wouldn't cover the whole thing. Said he hated to ask, but it was urgent. I hadn't even thought twice. I remember nodding, pulling out the checkbook from the kitchen drawer, and writing the amount down without hesitation. My thumb trembled as I ran it over the ink. The paper felt like it might burn me. They had used my money. My money. For the trip, they told me I couldn't come on. The sharpness of betrayal has a way of slicing deeper when it's not shouted, but whispered. I sat back, staring blankly at the wall. My chest ached, but I pressed a hand there, willing it to pass. I wouldn't cry. Not for this. Not again. Robert always said I had the spine of a soldier, even if I never wore a uniform. Instead of falling apart, I stood up, walked to the vanity, brushed my hair back, applied a soft touch of lipstick. Pink Rose, 72. The same one I wore to Robert's funeral. That same shade had been with me through war deployments, hospital rooms, PTA meetings, and now, exile by my own kin. I needed air. Outside, the sky was cloudless, too blue to be trusted. I walked the perimeter of the garden, past the roses I had planted last spring. Their petals bowed like they too were exhausted. I pulled a few weeds, snipped a wilted bloom, but nothing felt quite real, like I was walking through a dream someone else had designed for me. I thought about all the years I had been careful, graceful, accommodating, the quiet sacrifices, the way I stepped aside when Malcolm said he needed space to grow, then again when Vanessa needed creative control over the household. Every inch I'd given had turned into a mile of absence. Now, here I was, forgotten in the very kingdom I had helped build. I sat on the old stone bench beneath the dogwood tree and pulled the cruise receipt from my pocket, stared at it until the numbers blurred. Then, something shifted. Not rage. No, not quite. It was colder than that. Sharper. It was the realization that I had been too quiet, too trusting. That my silence had been mistaken for consent. That I had allowed them to erase me piece by piece, smile by smile. I folded the receipt neatly, slid it into a drawer back in the guest house, and I stood in front of the mirror. I met my own eyes for a long time, studied the lines, the small veins near my temples, the flecks of grey in my lashes. But more than that, I looked for the woman Robert used to see, the one who could keep a whole family standing. "You are not a footnote," I whispered. The silence agreed. Later that night I picked up the phone. The landline still worked, though it rarely rang anymore. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, one I knew by heart. After 3 rings, a voice answered. "Cyrus Walker," it said. I closed my eyes and drew a breath deep enough to steady the ache. "Cyrus," I said. "It's Margaret Lane." A pause. Then, "Margaret, My God. It's been... I need you to look into something for me, I interrupted gently. And I need absolute discretion. He cleared his throat. You always did know how to open a conversation. I'm serious. His tone sobered. All right, what do you need? I want to activate my rights, I said. Another pause. As majority silent shareholder? That's right. Another beat of quiet, and then the weight in his voice changed. Margaret, are you sure? I looked once more toward the main house. The porch light was on. 2 figures, moved behind the curtains. Laughing, maybe. Or not even thinking of me at all. I'm sure, I said. The past had been about surviving. Now, it was time to remember who I was before I started shrinking. Robert once told me, "The only time you should ever look down, Margaret, is to find your footing." And I planned to do exactly that. The day after I spoke to Cyrus, I cleaned every corner of the guest house like I was expecting someone important. Not a guest, but something heavier. Something I'd tucked away for years. Power. The morning sun stretched long shadows through the lace curtains. I brewed my coffee strong, the way Robert used to make it, and stood at the sink, sipping slowly. Outside, Malcolm's SUV pulled out of the driveway. Vanessa's wide-brimmed sun hat bounced in the passenger seat as they drove off, probably heading to another brunch meeting. She was always networking, always smiling, always sharpening her knives with honey. They had no idea. I walked to my desk and opened the bottom drawer. Nestled among old recipe cards and expired coupons was a manila folder I hadn't touched in over a decade. My name, Margaret Lane, typed neatly in the corner. Inside were copies of incorporation documents, silent shareholder certificates, and a small stack of legal correspondence. Proof that I had once been something more than background noise. When Robert was still alive, he insisted we protect our investments. Just in case, he'd said. So I became the silent partner in a holding company that controlled most of our shared assets, investments, land, even partial ownership of the Lane family trust. He didn't want Malcolm to have access to everything too soon. Let the boy earn his weight, Robert used to say. Otherwise, the weight will bury him. But after Robert died, and Malcolm returned from college all ideas and confidence, I'd softened. Bit by bit, I handed over responsibilities. Let him feel like the man, I told myself. That's what Robert would want. Now, I saw how badly I had mistaken enabling for love. That afternoon, Cyrus came to the guest house. Same grey suit, same serious eyes. A bit more weathered, but still sharp. He took off his hat as he stepped inside, scanning the room like it held ghosts. Margaret, he said, his voice a mix of warmth and caution. Cyrus, I nodded. You look like you've been reading my mind. He chuckled, but it faded quickly. You're sure about this? Once we pull the trigger, it's going to rattle the whole house. Good, I said. We sat across from each other, my old oak table between us. Cyrus laid out the documents, his pen tapping lightly on the folder. You're still the majority silent shareholder, he confirmed. 52%. You have the legal right to activate oversight authority over any property, account, or asset managed under the Lane Holdings umbrella. Including the house, I said. He nodded. And the yacht. I blinked. Yacht. Cyrus flipped through a few pages and handed one to me. A recent acquisition, it said. The Gilded Magnolia, purchased through Lane Holdings, funded in part by a transfer from the family trust. Malcolm had bought a yacht, with trust money, and they told me they were struggling. I stared at the name. Gilded Magnolia. It sounded like something out of a southern soap opera. Pretentious, glossy, and desperate to be adored. Cyrus must have read my face. It's registered for a 2-week cruise to the Lesser Antilles, launching next Thursday. The exact cruise they'd disinvited me from. I set the paper down slowly. The fury had cooled since yesterday, turning into something quieter and far more dangerous. "Tell me what I need to sign," I said. He slid a stack of documents forward. I signed where he pointed, each stroke steadier than the last. The papers transferred temporary management rights, activated oversight clauses, and opened the door to revoke financial privileges. Legally, I wasn't just Malcolm's mother now. I was his majority partner, his superior. Cyrus watched me as I signed the last line. "This is a strong move, Margaret. Stronger than anything I've seen from you in a long time." I met his eyes. "I'm not doing this for revenge." "I didn't say you were." I placed the pen down. "I'm doing this to save him, from becoming someone he can't come back from." Cyrus nodded slowly, folding the documents back into the folder. "Then let's get started." The next morning, the gears began turning. I received confirmation emails, alerts from the bank, and new access credentials to financial dashboards I hadn't looked at in years. The system still had my name woven through it, like fine thread. Cyrus handled most of the filings, but every so often I had to sign a form or verify something by phone. The sound of my own name again, spoken with authority, was a kind of awakening. By the third day, my name had reappeared on internal communications. The yacht's captain was notified. The management firm updated contact protocols. I wasn't hiding anymore. But none of it felt real until the box arrived. A sleek, dark wooden case delivered by courier. Inside, a keycard, a printed itinerary, and a black leather portfolio with the initials ML engraved in gold. On top of everything was a simple note in Cyrus's neat handwriting. "Board 2 days early. No one will question it. The ship is yours now." I traced the edge of the card with my fingers. I hadn't been on a ship in years, not since Robert's retirement cruise. But this wasn't about luxury. This was about walking through the front door of my own life again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring out at the stars through the window. The yard beyond the guest house shimmered with dew. I could see the porch lights of the main house glowing faintly, like a spotlight in a play I was no longer invited to. I picked up a photo of Malcolm when he was 5. He had a gap-toothed grin, cheeks sticky with frosting, a birthday hat askew on his head. That boy had loved me. That boy had cried when I scraped my knee and promised to build me a castle. Where had he gone? Was he buried under ambition, or just never there at all? I pressed the photo to my chest. "Maybe I failed you," I whispered. "But I won't leave you like this." In the stillness, a breeze moved through the cracks in the window. It carried the faintest scent of magnolias, even though the season had passed. A good omen, maybe. Or Robert, reminding me I still had roots, that I was not just the garden, but the tree. I turned off the lamp and lay back down. There was a ship waiting, and a reckoning to set sail. 2 days before the ship was set to sail, I stood at the edge of the private dock, the wind lifting strands of my hair like fingers from the past. A black car idled behind me, engine humming low like a growl held in the throat. The driver, a young man in a crisp navy uniform, held open the door, but didn't speak. He didn't need to. The moment I stepped out, everything changed. I wore the navy blue suit Robert once said made me look like I owned the whole damn coast. The skirt hugged my waist just right, the blazer sharp at the shoulders. On my lapel, a silver magnolia pin, my own quiet emblem of resilience. My heels tapped against the polished wood of the dock like a drumbeat announcing my arrival. The gilded magnolia loomed ahead, gleaming in the early light. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. White and gold trim, curved lines, as sleek as money and as quiet as secrets. But she was also mine. I didn't need to own her with words. Paperwork had already taken care of that. What I needed now was presence. A tall man in a double-breasted coat descended the gangway. He moved like a man used to giving orders, until he saw me. "Mrs. Lane?" he asked. "Yes." He straightened. "Captain Thorne, ma'am. Welcome aboard." He extended a gloved hand, and when I placed mine in his, he bowed his head slightly, not out of obligation, but out of something else. Recognition. "The Gilded Magnolia is at your service." That one sentence undid something in me I didn't realize had been wound so tightly. I nodded once, curt, composed. Inside, I was trembling, but not from fear. For the first time in years, someone saw me. The owner's suite was something out of a dream. Cedar-paneled walls gave off the warm, subtle scent of old wealth and thoughtful craftsmanship. The floors were soft underfoot, thick rugs in dark navy and cream. There was a writing desk with a fresh notepad embossed with the ship's name, a king-sized bed dressed in fine linen, and a set of glass doors that opened to a private balcony. But it was the silence that struck me the most. Not the absence of sound, the presence of peace. There was a fruit basket on the table, a chilled bottle of wine, and a handwritten note on stationery. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Lane. All arrangements are as requested. C. Thorne." I walked slowly through the space, fingers trailing over the backs of leather chairs, the edge of the desk, the velvet throw at the foot of the bed. This wasn't just a suite. It was a reclamation. I stood for a long time in front of the vanity, looking at myself under soft gold lighting. The woman staring back wasn't quite the version I remembered. She was older, yes. There were more lines, yes. But there was something new in the eyes. A steadiness. A storm held at bay. I opened my leather folio. Inside, Cyrus had arranged everything. Printed manifests, security protocols, emergency overrides. There was even a personal note from him. "Authority means nothing without clarity. Speak only when necessary. Look once, speak twice, and let silence do the rest." I slipped the card back into place. Outside, crew members were preparing for the guests' arrival. I glanced at the itinerary. Malcolm and Vanessa would board tomorrow. I had exactly one night and morning to reacquaint myself with every inch of the ship. And that's what I did. Captain Thorne personally gave me the tour. We walked through lounges, sun decks, dining halls, and engine rooms. He never once questioned my presence. Not even when I asked for the security footage review room. Not even when I requested staff rotation schedules. "Would you like to review the guest list, Mrs. Lane?" he asked. "I already know who matters," I replied. We stopped in front of the master dining room, its chandeliers dimmed in the afternoon light. "We have a full staff ready for the voyage," he said. "Shall I assign a steward specifically to your suite?" "No," I said. "I prefer discretion over deference." He nodded once, as though filing that detail away in a vault. That night, I stood alone on the top deck. The ocean stretched endlessly around me, dark and patient. I remembered Robert's voice, telling me about the stars he learned to navigate by in the Navy. I tilted my head to the sky and searched for Polaris. I found it. It steadied me. Below deck, the engines thrummed like a heartbeat. Somewhere in the crew lounge, I heard laughter, muffled, sincere. I envied them in a way. Their lives moved forward each day without calculation, no hidden agendas. just tasks to be done and ships to be steered. I returned to my suite just past midnight. The wind had picked up, but the ship barely swayed. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the writing desk. For the first time in years, I began to write. Not a note, not a shopping list, but a letter to myself. You are not invisible. You are not too late. You are not forgotten. I signed it with my full name. In the morning, the ship buzzed with arrival energy. Staff in crisp uniforms, champagne chilled, towels folded like swans. I remained in my suite, sipping black tea, watching from the security camera feed on my tablet as passengers trickled aboard. And then, Vanessa's laugh arrived before she did. It was loud, practiced, the kind of laugh meant to be overheard. She walked up the gangway in a white jumpsuit and oversized sunglasses, a straw bag swinging from her arm. Malcolm followed, carrying their bags, face sun-kissed and oblivious. They were all smiles, radiating the kind of confidence you only have when you believe you own the world. They walked past the crew, nodding like royalty. Vanessa snapped a selfie by the stairway, throwing up a peace sign with one hand, while the other held her champagne. Malcolm adjusted his collar and waved like a politician. I zoomed in slightly. Vanessa took a glass of champagne from a tray and whispered something into Malcolm's ear. He laughed. They didn't know, not yet. I leaned back in the chair and let the smile come, slow, quiet, steady. Let them enjoy today. Tomorrow the matriarch returns. The owner's suite was quiet, so quiet I could hear my own breath, steady and deliberate. Outside, the sea stretched wide and endless, but inside, everything was controlled, measured, as it should be. It was my second morning on the Gilded Magnolia, and my first morning watching them. I stood by the wall-mounted screen, hands folded behind my back. The live camera feed flickered for a moment before stabilizing. The atrium of the ship, gleaming marble floors, cascading crystal chandelier, and a circular staircase that wound up like a seashell, filled the screen. Malcolm and Vanessa had entered. Vanessa's heels echoed against the tile. Malcolm had traded his usual polo for a pastel button-down, open at the collar. His sunglasses rested on his forehead like a lazy crown. They looked like a travel magazine come to life. Perfect lighting, perfect angles, picture-perfect parasites. They didn't know about the cameras in the chandeliers, didn't know the feeds could be routed to the owner's suite, didn't know the ship had been configured under my authority. But I did. I watched as they explored the main deck, pausing to admire the open bar and complimentary wine list, paid for, of course, by the very trust they believed they'd outmaneuvered. Vanessa clinked her glass against Malcolm's. "To freedom," she said, laughing. "To us," Malcolm replied. I muted the screen. The sound was too sharp, too careless. I turned away and crossed the suite. The morning light filtered in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden ribbons across the cedar-panelled walls. There was something calming in the geometry of it all, the symmetry, the muted elegance. I trailed my fingers along the arm of the leather armchair and sat. On the coffee table lay the folio. I opened it again, even though I already knew every page by heart. Financial statements, authorization codes. A flowchart Cyrus had annotated in blue ink, with steps of enforcement if I chose to escalate. I wouldn't need to. Not yet. Not unless they pushed me further. I wasn't here to humiliate them. Not entirely. I was here to make them see, to feel, to learn the language of gratitude in a way no checkbook could teach. It was nearly noon when a soft knock came at the door. "Come in," I said. It was Captain Thorne. Everything is proceeding smoothly, Mum. Your instructions have been followed to the letter. Have they inquired? Not yet. They've asked about the owner's suite, but assumed it was unoccupied. I instructed staff not to comment. Good. Maintain silence. Let curiosity grow roots. Yes, Ma'am. He hesitated. Speak freely, I said. If I may, what you're doing here, it's not just tactical. It's something else. Something I can't quite put into words. It's called accountability, I said. And it's long overdue. He gave a small bow. As you wish. That evening, I dressed carefully. A black dress. Simple. Elegant. A strand of pearls Robert had given me on our 25th anniversary. I gathered my hair into a low chignon and applied lipstick with a steady hand. I didn't plan to reveal myself. Not yet. But I wanted to feel the ground they were walking on. I wanted to see their performance up close. I stepped out of the owner's suite and took the service elevator to the upper dining salon. I lingered near the piano, half hidden behind one of the white columns. My presence wasn't questioned. The staff knew who I was. That was enough. Malcolm and Vanessa entered 20 minutes later. Vanessa wore red, always the performer. Her dress shimmered like it had been dipped in wine. Malcolm walked beside her, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone, his wristwatch catching every bit of light in the room. They took a seat near the window. I stayed in the shadows, close enough to listen. Can you believe this suite is just empty? Vanessa whispered. A waste. I bet the owner is some crusty old oil tycoon who never even boards. Malcolm chuckled. Or it's just a vanity title. People like to own things they don't use. I smiled. They ordered champagne. Vanessa toasted again. To our future, one without strings. Clink. They ate well. Ordered the chef's tasting menu. Laughed too loudly. Vanessa leaned in often, brushing her hand over Malcolm's wrist like they were still honeymooning. They looked free. Effortless. But I could see the cracks. Malcolm glanced over his shoulder more than once. Vanessa's eyes flicked too quickly toward the staircases. They weren't expecting me, but somewhere their instincts were beginning to whisper. Before dessert, I turned to leave. I didn't need to see more. I already knew the shape of their delusions. Back in the suite, I opened a drawer and retrieved the envelope I had prepared. Inside was a copy of the invoice, the $14,800 charged to the trust account, highlighted in yellow. Beneath it, a handwritten note. I trusted you with a roof. You bought an escape. I sealed it. Tomorrow it would be placed on their cabin desk by housekeeping. Quiet, undeniable. I stepped out onto the balcony. The wind had softened. The water below sparkled under a moon that looked older than time. Somewhere below, the engines murmured like distant thunder, a steady pulse that echoed in my chest. This wasn't vengeance. Not really. This was a mirror. And soon, they'd have to look into it. I returned inside, poured myself a splash of bourbon, and sat at the writing desk. I jotted down a few notes in my journal. Nothing long, just thoughts. Lines, I might say. Questions I might ask. Memories I didn't want to forget. Like the first time Malcolm ever lied to me, age 9. He said he hadn't broken the vase, but the shards were still on his shoes. He cried when I called him out. Said he was sorry. That was the last time he cried in front of me. It's strange. What returns when you're quiet? The real stories come back, not the polished family photos, but the echoes, the missed moments, the weight you carried so others didn't have to. I looked around the suite, the wood, the light, the silence. It was all mine, for now. but I didn't want to keep it. I just wanted them to understand what it meant to earn something, to hold something with care, to not take love and money for granted. Tomorrow we begin, and when the locks click shut and the silence grows teeth, they will finally hear the truth. The morning started with a breakfast buffet and a keycard deactivation order. I signed the authorization form just after 7 a.m. Captain Thorne brought it on a silver tray, because formality, I've learned, carries a particular weight when delivering punishment. The order was clean, clinical. Deactivate cabin 302's keycards at exactly 8:15 a.m. Reroute access permissions to room 0115. When the moment arrived, I was already watching. On the screen in my suite, the hallway camera blinked to life. Malcolm and Vanessa stood at their cabin door, laughing about something. Malcolm reached into his pocket, pulled out his keycard, and swiped. Nothing. He tried again. Vanessa furrowed her brow. Another swipe. Still nothing. Their laughter softened into confusion. Vanessa leaned forward and pressed the call button on the wall. A crew member, one I had briefed the day before, approached politely. "Is there a problem, Mr. Lane?" "Yeah," Malcolm said, holding up the keycard. "It's not working. Can you check the system?" "One moment, sir." He tapped at the panel, feigned a small frown. "According to the system, this cabin has been reassigned." "Reassigned?" Vanessa snapped. "To who?" "I'm afraid I don't have access to that information, ma'am, but I've been instructed to escort you to your new accommodations." The silence that followed was beautiful, unspoken, heavy. "There must be some mistake," Malcolm said, but he followed the crewman anyway. Room 014 wasn't on any brochure. It sat near the engine bay, just above the laundry quarters. The hallway was narrow, lit by flickering bulbs that buzzed faintly. The walls bore the scent of metal and detergent, and the hum of the ship's machinery pulsed just beneath the floorboards. The room itself was functional, barely. 2 twin beds, a dresser with one drawer stuck half open, a small porthole that looked out to nothing but steel scaffolding. The bathroom was shared with 2 other cabins. "This is unacceptable," Vanessa hissed. The crewman shrugged with the indifference of someone following orders. "I can bring your luggage shortly." Malcolm said nothing, just stood there, lips parted, hands at his sides. I watched all of it unfold. Then I muted the camera. The next few hours passed slowly. I took tea in the lounge, greeted the stewards with a calm nod, and walked the upper decks like any other guest. Except I wasn't any guest. I was the storm hiding behind glass. By midday, the crew had delivered their luggage. Vanessa had demanded a manager. The manager, a kind man named Luca, who wore an earpiece and a carefully unreadable face, apologized for the inconvenience and handed her a printed note. "Please enjoy the new accommodations. Adjustments have been made to reflect revised arrangements." That was all. Vanessa's face reddened. Malcolm read the note twice, then folded it into his pocket without a word. I spent the afternoon reviewing the ship's operations, security, logs, expense reports, menu selections. There was a certain calm in the detail, a sense of rightful authority I hadn't felt in years, but I couldn't lie to myself. There was a cost to this power. That night, after dinner, I tried to sleep. I lay in bed, eyes closed, listening. Not to the quiet, to something else. A low, mechanical rhythm. At first I thought it came from the ship's stabilizers, but as I turned onto my side, I realized it was only in my head, a kind of phantom echo. My body was mimicking the vibrations I knew they were hearing from down below, room 014, wedged against the laundry engines. I sat up and turned on the lamp. Why was I feeling this? Why did I hear it too? In the dim light, I walked to the vanity and sat down, opened the drawer, pulled out the cruise brochure they had left for guests, glossy, full of blue water and gold lettering. I flipped to the deck map, located room 014, then traced my finger to where I now sat. 2 worlds, 1 ship. I closed the brochure and looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back, calm but distant. I had moved the pieces, set the trap. But now that they were inside it, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt weight. Because even when the lesson is just, it doesn't mean it's painless. The next morning, the first ripple came. Vanessa stormed into the main lobby, sunglasses on, lips tight, demanding to speak to the ship's concierge. Malcolm followed her, shoulders hunched, not from fatigue, but from something worse. Realization. I watched them from the quiet lounge above, the one with the stained glass skylight. I sipped my coffee and listened through the surveillance feed as the staff gently, politely, told them nothing. Their questions bounced back like tennis balls against velvet walls. Who changed our room? I'm sorry, that information isn't available. There must be someone we can talk to. I'll be sure to log your concern, ma'am. They walked away with nothing, not even a name. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Not because of guilt, not entirely, but because justice, when done right, rattles something loose in the soul. I sat again at the writing desk, wrote a letter I didn't plan to send, just to write it. Malcolm, do you remember the first time you fell off your bike? I ran to you before you hit the ground, scraped knees, dirt-streaked cheeks. You cried, and I carried you inside, bandaged you, made you chocolate milk. I would have given you my own bones that day if it meant you wouldn't feel pain. But now, I see. Pain teaches what love sometimes can't. Sleep well, Mom. I folded the letter and placed it in my journal. Then, in silence, I laid back down, closed my eyes, and finally slept. The sun rose slow and golden over the horizon, casting its light like judgment across the gilded magnolia's decks. I'd been up for hours. There's a kind of anticipation that makes sleep impossible, the kind that coils itself into your ribs and settles there like a second heartbeat. Today was the day. I dressed with care. White trousers, pale lavender blouse, sleeves rolled just enough to say I didn't come here to perform, but I wouldn't be ignored either. I chose no jewelry, no armor, just truth. The ship was quiet that early. A few crew members nodded politely as I passed. The scent of salt and citrus hung in the morning air. I made my way to the VIP sun deck, an exclusive area closed to most passengers. It was one of the perks of ownership, privacy, perspective. I settled into a lounger at the far end, beneath a white linen canopy. A glass of black coffee rested beside me. I didn't plan to move. The view was beautiful. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, a horizon of clean lines and quiet judgment. Below, the bustle of breakfast and sunscreen-slicked conversations filled the lower decks. But not here. Not yet. This place was still untouched, still mine, and I didn't have to wait long. Around 10 o'clock, the doors at the far end burst open. Vanessa. Her heels clicked sharply across the polished wood. She wore oversized sunglasses and a white silk cover-up that flared with each step. Behind her, Malcolm followed, less certain, his mouth a thin line. She saw me before he did, and for a moment, she stopped. Frozen. Then her voice, tight, incredulous. You? I didn't respond, just raised my coffee cup to my lips and took a slow sip. Malcolm turned. When he saw me, his whole body went still. Mum? The word hung between us. I said nothing. Captain Thorne appeared a moment later, as if summoned by the gravity of the moment. He approached from behind them, silent, composed. "Is this some kind of joke?" Vanessa demanded, pulling her sunglasses off. Her eyes were wild now. "Why are you here? In that suite?" Malcolm took a step forward. What are you doing on this ship?" I stood, not quickly, not with drama, but with the kind of certainty that doesn't need volume. "I'm drinking coffee," I said, "on my ship." The silence was total. Vanessa blinked, her lips parted. Malcolm's jaw flexed, but no words came. Captain Thorne cleared his throat. "Mrs. Lane is the majority owner of the Gilded Magnolia. Her authority is recognized in all ship operations." Vanessa turned toward him, stunned. "That's not possible. She lives in a guest house." "Indeed," he replied with perfect neutrality. "But she also holds 52% of Lane Holdings' executive shares, including the assets used to acquire this vessel." Malcolm looked like he'd been punched. I took a step forward, looked him in the eyes. "I trusted you," I said softly, "with everything, and you used that trust to erase me." He opened his mouth to speak. Nothing came. Vanessa scoffed. "So what now? You're here to embarrass us?" "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "You've already done that yourselves." She turned to Malcolm. "Say something. Fix this." But he couldn't. Not yet. He just stood there, staring at the deck like it might open and swallow him. "You bought a cruise with money meant for a roof," I said, my voice level. "You lied to me. And then you locked me out of a life I helped build. I didn't come here to punish you. I came to remind you who paid the price." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You act like this is noble. You're humiliating us in front of strangers." I looked around the sun deck. Empty. Not a single soul but us, and Captain Thorne, who had wisely stepped aside. "There are no strangers here," I said. "Just the truth." Malcolm finally spoke. "You could have told me. You could have just talked to me." "I did," I said. "You stopped listening." He flinched. I saw it. Just a twitch of his eye, a narrowing of his shoulders. It was the first sign of recognition I'd seen in weeks, months, maybe years. "I didn't want it to come to this," I added. "But it has," Vanessa muttered. "Yes," I said. "It has." I stepped forward, put a hand on the railing, looked out across the ocean. "I built a life that held you, gave you comfort, protection, opportunity, and somewhere along the line you stopped seeing me as a person. You saw a checkbook, a burden, a ghost. But I was always watching, always here." I turned back to them, let the silence settle. "You can stay," I said. "Enjoy the ocean, the food, the luxury you didn't earn. But know this. Every door you open on this ship, you open because I let you." Vanessa's lips curled. "So what? This is your revenge fantasy?" "No," I said, meeting her gaze evenly. "This is a mirror, and if you don't like what you see, that's not my fault." Malcolm looked up at me then, eyes red, not from tears, not yet, but from something deeper. Shame, maybe, or memory. I saw something flicker across his face, a moment of the boy he once was, the one who used to bring me drawings of our house with little hearts in the windows, the one who used to beg me to stay a few more minutes at bedtime. "I didn't mean for it to be like this," he whispered. "I know," I said, "but it is." And that's when it hit him. Not like a blow, but like the slow sinking of a heavy truth. He reached for Vanessa's arm. She pulled slightly away. I turned and walked past them. Captain Thorne nodded slightly as I passed. Respectful. Wordless. Back to my suite. Back to my stillness. Back to my name. and for the first time in years, it felt like mine again. The morning after the upper deck confrontation, the ship moved as though nothing had changed. The same waves rocked the hull, the same silverware clinked softly over breakfast. But in the air between us, me, Malcolm, Vanessa, everything had shifted. The air felt heavier, as if truth carried a kind of gravity. I took breakfast in my suite. Captain Thorne sent word that the couple had requested a meeting, not in public, and not in their new cabin. They'd asked to speak with me in the ship's library, a quiet, wood-panelled room no one under the age of 60 ever used. I smiled when I heard. That, at least, showed they understood the tone I'd set. I arrived early, not because I was eager, but because I wanted time to own the space. The library was warm and dim, lined with dark oak shelves and deep leather chairs, the kind of room that remembered things. The ship's gentle motion made the overhead lights sway slightly, casting a halo across the central table. I placed a folder there, navy blue, leather-bound, and waited. At 10:04 a.m., the door opened. Malcolm entered first. He looked tired. Not just the kind of tired that sleep could cure, but worn in the eyes, like he'd seen something inside himself he didn't recognize. His collared shirt was wrinkled, and there was a faint tremble in his fingers. Vanessa followed, her steps slower than usual. She wasn't wearing heels, no sunglasses, just a simple blouse and slacks, practical, subdued. Her mask was slipping. They sat across from me. For a while, no one spoke. Finally, Malcolm cleared his throat. "Thank you for meeting with us." I nodded once. He glanced at the folder. "Is that what I think it is?" "It's everything," I said. I pushed the folder toward them. Inside, printed statements, flagged transfers, receipts, the cruise invoice, trust withdrawals, proof of manipulation, and beneath them, a single-page addendum, the trust agreement. Vanessa flipped through the pages quickly, too quickly to read, only fast enough to panic. Her fingers trembled when she landed on the document with her name printed in bold letters. "This is," she began. "This is serious." "It's not a punishment," I said. "It's an invitation." Malcolm looked at me, his voice hoarse. "You froze our accounts." I did. "For how long?" I slid the trust agreement forward. "Until the conditions are met." He read silently. His lips moved, mouthing the words. 1 calendar year without financial assistance from me or Lane Holdings. A monthly letter, written by hand, detailing what you've learned about work, respect, and family. No media appearances, no leveraging the Lane name, no contact with me unless initiated through those letters. Vanessa scoffed. "This is absurd. You can't—" "I can," I said. And I have. She looked to Malcolm, her face flushed. "Are you really going to just accept this?" He didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he opened the folder again, took out the cruise invoice, held it in both hands. "I lied," he said finally. "About the roof. About everything." His voice was low, raw. "I let her talk me into it," he continued, nodding slightly at Vanessa. "But I didn't stop her. I wanted to believe I could have all of it, comfort, power, distance from you, and that it would somehow be fine." He looked at me fully now, but it wasn't, and I know that now. I kept my face still, but my fingers tightened slightly around my chair's arm. Vanessa rose. "This is emotional blackmail. You're trying to control our lives with money." "No," I said calmly. "I'm giving you the chance to earn back something more valuable than money. Your character." She opened her mouth to reply, but Malcolm stood first. "I'll do it." Vanessa spun toward him. You can't be serious? I am, he said, voice firmer. I think it's time I learned who I am without the fallback. There was a pause, thick and reverberating. Vanessa stared at him, disbelief warring with fear. I could see it, her scrambling to calculate what came next if the safety net was gone. He took the pen from the table and signed the agreement. I stood slowly, walked around the table, and I placed my hand briefly on his shoulder. I don't need your apology, I said. I need your effort. He nodded. Vanessa stayed seated, arms crossed. She didn't sign. Not yet. That was her choice. She stared out the library window at nothing, like she couldn't bear to look at the paper in front of her. You said this was an invitation, Malcolm said. What's it inviting us to? To humility, I replied. To dignity, to growth. You've both mistaken comfort for love and convenience for strength. I'm giving you a map out of that. Before I left, I placed one more thing on the table, a blank envelope. You'll know what it's for when the time is right. As I stepped into the corridor, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a calm resolve that pulsed through me like the hum of the ship. No part of this was easy, but healing never is. Behind me, Malcolm remained at the table, head bowed, hands folded. One bridge had burned. Another was being rebuilt, one letter at a time. At sunrise, the ocean was a sheet of soft steel, glinting under a pastel sky. I stood on the upper deck, wrapped in a cashmere shawl, coffee warming my hands. Below, the crew moved with quiet precision, routine at its finest. But this morning wasn't routine. Captain Thorne approached just after 6. His expression was composed, but the stiffness in his posture betrayed the weight of what was to come. Everything is prepared, Mrs. Lane, he said. I nodded. Let's proceed. 2 hours later, Malcolm and Vanessa Lane were escorted to the loading bay. They were not handcuffed, not shamed, just asked to collect their luggage and follow protocol. No guards, no spectacle. But there was no mistaking the finality in the way the crew stood a few feet back, giving them space, but not warmth. They were dressed simply. No designer shades, no show. Vanessa's hair was tied back in a rushed ponytail. Malcolm carried a duffel bag that looked heavier than it should have been, as though its contents held more than clothing, perhaps guilt, maybe regret. They were not taken to the grand port of Lisbon, nor to the sleek private dockyards reserved for VIP passengers. Instead, the gilded Magnolia had anchored off the edge of a quiet fishing town tucked along the Iberian coast, a place whose name even the GPS barely registered. A place with cracked stone paths, salt-bleached rooftops, and the scent of smoked sardines in the air. The dock was silent, except for the gentle slap of water against the wood. A few curious locals paused to watch, but no one spoke. The small boat that ferried them to shore bobbed lightly, waiting. Vanessa hesitated before stepping on. She glanced back at the ship, at the elegant metal and glass that had once been her kingdom. Now it was a fortress she no longer held keys to. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Malcolm held her hand as she boarded. On the dock, a local man with weathered skin and kind eyes stood beside a modest taxi. Inside the vehicle were 2 items, a sealed envelope and a key. Malcolm opened the envelope first. The letter read, "You have 1 month's rent, paid in full for the attached apartment. It's small, but safe. You will find the key enclosed. No staff, no safety nets. You begin here. Not as punishment, but as potential. You know the condition, no money, no contact. 1 letter, handwritten, each month. Choose what kind of person you wish to become." ML Vanessa let the letter fall to her lap, You've got to be kidding me, she muttered. Malcolm said nothing, just stared at the key resting in his palm. You're really going through with this? She asked him, her voice shaking. You're going to play along with her little morality play? He didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the sea, where the ship had already begun to pull away, its white hull cutting across the horizon like a blade. The silence lingered. He turned to her, then, his voice quiet, but sure. She didn't abandon us. She gave us a start line. Vanessa scoffed. She gave us humiliation. No, he said. She gave us a mirror. They sat in the taxi for a while before giving the driver the address. As they passed rows of stone houses and local vendors pushing carts of bread, the contrast to their usual world grew sharper. There were no polished black SUVs here, no glossy brunch menus. Just life. Raw and quiet. Back aboard the Magnolia, I remained at the stern as the coastline shrank. I could no longer see their faces, but I imagined them standing on the dock, one with clenched fists, the other with open hands. The ache in my chest wasn't anger anymore. It was a quieter grief, the kind that comes from letting go of someone you still love, even when they haven't earned it. Captain Thorne approached again, standing beside me in silence. After a moment, he spoke. Do you believe they'll write? I smiled faintly. I believe in second chances, even when they're not asked for. He gave a small nod. That's rare. Not rare, I said. Just unpopular. Below deck, the crew resumed their rhythm. Passengers gathered at the bow for photos, oblivious to the private saga that had just unfolded. I remained at the stern, watching, waiting. The wind picked up slightly, lifting my scarf. I whispered, though no one could hear. This was never a punishment. This was a doorway. In the privacy of my suite later that evening, I lit a candle. Not for ritual, for presence. One flame, steady in the dark, a reminder. On the desk lay a fresh envelope, addressed to my estate manager. A short note requesting a check-in on the Lisbon apartment in 30 days. Not to interfere, just to know, just in case, just in hope. I closed my journal, stepped to the window. Outside, the sea breathed against the hull like a sleeping animal. If they chose to walk forward, they'd have to do it alone. But they wouldn't be completely unseen. Some lessons begin in silence. Others start with a door softly closing. And if they chose to write me, really write, I'd be waiting. 3 days after Lisbon, the gilded Magnolia sailed north through the Bay of Biscay, away from the warm waters that had once held my sorrow. The ocean here was colder, moodier, almost slate grey in the morning, like a mirror for reflection. I spent long hours on the observation deck, not watching the waves, but letting them pass. I didn't need to chase meaning anymore. I just needed to allow it. Captain Thorne approached me during sunset on the 4th day. The sky had cracked open into a soft coral wash, and we stood in silence until he cleared his throat. We'll be docking in Southampton by noon tomorrow, he said. I nodded. I won't be staying. His brow lifted slightly, a question he didn't voice. I turned to him and said, I need you to chart a course inland, Minnesota. He blinked. The Mississippi River? Yes. I want to see the water I grew up beside. The parts of me that weren't touched by wealth, by inheritance, by betrayal. Just the current. He nodded slowly. We'll make it happen. In my suite that night, I spread out a navigational map and found the point where the river split the northern woods, a quiet little bend no tourist cared about. I drew a small circle around it with a pencil, soft and sure, a place to begin again. On the vanity sat 2 skeins of yarn, One was cream, a soft woolen twist I'd packed without thinking. The other I'd bought from a local vendor in Lisbon, deep navy blue, rich like midnight. Malcolm's colour. I began knitting that night, not because I needed warmth, but because I needed rhythm, the simple in and out of the needle, the pull of progress. The cream scarf would be for me. The navy one? Well, I didn't know yet. Maybe it would sit in a drawer, or maybe, if he wrote again, truly wrote, I'd send it to him. A gift, not of approval, but of hope. By the next afternoon, we were inland. The Magnolia moved slower now, navigating the wide bends of river and quiet crossings. We passed low-hanging trees, and the smell of earth replaced the salt air. It felt grounding, honest. I kept my windows open. I let in the scent of wet soil and pine, listened to the birdsong instead of the hush of engines. I slept longer, ate less, wrote more. I shed my silk robes for simple sweaters. I let the grey streaks in my hair show. I drank coffee from a chipped ceramic mug instead of bone china. These things mattered more now. I began a new journal, the first page dated simply, after. On its pages I wrote not of the past, but of the present, of small things, how many stitches I completed each day, what bird call I heard outside my window, the names of towns we passed that no one talked about in glossy magazines. One entry was just a list of colours I saw in the river at dawn. Pewter, amber, moss, shadow. And then, a week into the journey, the first letter arrived. It was postmarked from Lisbon, handwritten in Malcolm's blocky script. The paper was creased, a little stained. I opened it alone, by candlelight. Mom, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. I've never written to you like this, without asking for something, without expecting an answer. The apartment is small. The water heater groans. Vanessa says it smells like sardines. I think she's still angry, but she's here, and that's something. I applied for a job today, just stocking shelves at a market. No one recognized me. It felt strange and good, like I was invisible and visible at the same time. I made dinner, burnt it. We ate it anyway. I don't know what we're learning yet, but I know we're learning. Malcolm. I pressed the letter to my chest. No tears, just breath. The next day, I sat with my yarn and worked through 3 more rows of the navy scarf. Each stitch held more than wool. It held patience, intention, the fragile outline of forgiveness. Later that evening, I reread the letter, line by line, word by word. I let his voice echo in the stillness of the room. He had not apologized yet, but he had begun, and beginnings matter. I didn't know where this river ended, but I knew now it didn't matter. Life wasn't about docking. It was about movement, choosing what kind of person you become with every mile. Sometimes freedom isn't found in breaking free. Sometimes it's found in facing what bound you and walking through it, thread by thread. I wasn't Margaret Lane, the silent shareholder. I wasn't the widow in the guest house. I wasn't even the woman who orchestrated a lesson aboard a luxury ship. I was something else now. Someone freer, someone softer, perhaps, but not weaker. I kept a second candle burning that night, and beside it, I placed a photograph, one I hadn't looked at in years. It was of Malcolm as a child, grinning beside a sandbox, his cheeks covered in popsicle juice. Before ambition, before resentment, just joy. That photo stayed there for days. Sometimes healing begins not with forgiveness, but with memory. And as the sun lit the horizon with gold and the river curved gently ahead like an invitation, I whispered to the water, to the wind, to whatever came next. Let's begin. Not all revenge comes with sharp knives and tears. Some forms of revenge are quiet, patient, when you choose not to reclaim property, but to reclaim the truth. When you don't drown anyone, but give them the chance to learn how to swim on their own. Margaret didn't slam the door shut behind her son. She left it open, but only wide enough for those who dared to change to step through. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is to choose to heal, but not forget. To love, but not blindly. To stay silent, but not weak. And now, if you've ever been pushed out of the life that was supposed to be yours, I want to hear you. What do you think is the final boundary between forgiveness and letting go? Leave a line for Margaret, or for yourself, because every comment is also a stitch, mending the things that were never spoken out loud.